Hey guys, welcome back. We're going to do one last video on this Porsche. You're probably sick of seeing it already. If you watch the other videos, you know we took it apart, stripped it out, and retrofitted some modern electronics in it. Gave it a test run. Runs great. But when I was talking to the owner, back when we were originally talking about, working on the car, I thought maybe we can get some lights in this thing. You'll see here, it's got some fake headlights underneath this little plastic cover. Gonna see if I can poke holes in them and maybe get some little LEDs mounted up in there without doing any other damage to the car. We've got these little cavities in here. That'd be great for fog lights, maybe a couple of little amber LEDs. And even in the back, we've got these red plastic lenses, and there is a little hole that goes through the solid red plastic where the lenses mount. So I might be able to shine an LED through there to get some tail lights. So let's hopefully one last time take it apart and see what we can do with it. Okay, so we've got the body shell back off. You all know what this looks like already. The neat thing is this little front bumper stays attached to the chassis. It's not part of the body shell. So typically if we were wiring up a body, we'd have to run a plug somewhere if you wanted to be able to take the body off the car. But because this never has to leave the chassis, we can hardwire that right up with no disconnects anywhere. So that'll make it a little bit easier. So what I'm going to try to do now is take this front bumper off. I think it's attached by these two screws. In addition to this here, you can see where they just melted these little mounting tabs together. So I'm going to have to try to carefully get them apart, and then we're going to have to glue them back together when we go reassemble it. But that way I can do all the light work on this little piece off the chassis. It'll be easier, and then we can reinstall it when we're done. All right. So that was a failure. I'm really afraid I'm going to break some plastic here, and I don't want to do that. So, I tried for about 5 minutes to find a spot where I can, at least start the, separating it. Wasn't happening. But the good news is these little plastic covers, lenses, whatever you want to call them, they weren't glued on. They just, you can see there's little tabs on them and they snap right in. So those came right off. So we're going to leave this on the car. And I'm going to work from the front here to both drill them out and then, carefully fish the wires through and route them so that they don't get bound up on anything. Alright, so I'm going to be using 3mm LEDs. Pretty standard sizes are 3mm and then 5mm. For these, I might have used the 5s if I had them. I just don't happen to have any. But these are the 3mm. We're going to use a number 35 drill bit, which I find is just a hair smaller than the LED, and that's going to let us have some tension. When you install it in the car, it'll be held in there just by the friction of the hole being a little bit too small, and we'll throw some glue on it also. All right, so I drilled a small pilot hole in this lens, and then when I did, the lens just came right off the car. So that's actually going to make life a little easier for us. Reason being, if you look closely at this LED, I was going to have to run it in through the back because it has a little lip here that wouldn't let you push it through the hole this way, but it could go through that way. But now that this is out, I can drill it out properly, install the LED in it, and then slide the whole assembly back up in the bumper and glue it in place. So that'll be nice. So I'm gonna drill all 4 of these out. Hopefully all 4 of them come out of the car nice and cleanly like this one did. All right, all 4 of those came out painlessly. We have little holes here in the center. I'm going to enlarge them a bit so we can pass the LED and the wire through it. And then I'm going to glue the LEDs into these lenses and then glue the lenses into the car. Put some leads on the LEDs, also some wire leads, so we can work with that later. All right, so the lenses are all done and the LEDs are in them. You can see I just drilled a hole in the center and they poke right through. That one's a little loose. This guy's nice and snug. But that's going to look really good. It's just going to have a light source right in the middle of where that lens is. So I'm looking forward to see how that looks. Alright, so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to drill through these center holes here to give clearance for the wires and everything else and the LED to come through. It's the holes that are there are a little too narrow, and they were just originally designed to hold those lenses in place. So I'm going to stick this here because I have to go all the way through and I don't want to poke a hole in the tire. So at least if I go through, hopefully this will stop the drill. All right. Now what I'm doing, I'm using a really high speed and I'm barely pushing on the drill. Reason being, if I try to just sail through there, this plastic will no doubt shatter. So you can see here, I'm just going real slow to try to poke through there without doing any real damage. You know what, I'm going to lower the, I'm going to get a smaller drill bit too, just probably a little bit. Don't want to overdo it. Let's try this one. Yeah, so that'll clear, that'll give plenty of clearance. Let's try that. Alright, so now we're through the bezel. You can see there's no damage there. Now we're going to go through this red plastic. Alright, good. So that was painless. Got a nice hole there, and this guy will now just drop right in. We'll glue it in place. And that's how it's going to look. And that's going to be real nice when it's lit up, because the light will shine off the reflector a little bit. It's actually going to probably light up that lens a little bit. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this is going to look once we get her all done. So I'm going to do that for the other four, or the other three light holes. I'm going to pass on the center ones for now. We're just going to work on the headlights. Maybe I'll also circle around back to that. Who knows? All right, so they're all drilled despite my best efforts to be super careful. You can see here this raised area, this square raised area on this side, cracked a little bit here. The lens will hide that, so I'm not worried about it, but it's unfortunate. I didn't want that to happen, but it happens. But you can see that the holes come clean through, and I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to solder up some leads onto those LEDs, put some shrink wrap on them, and then wire them into the car. Okay, I've got about a ½ foot of wire soldered up to each LED. I got some shrink wrap on it, and then glued them into the little headlight, the fake plastic headlights. So next step is to route them through the front bumper and make sure everything clears. Alright, so all four came through. I don't see any clearance issues with any of the wires. So what we're going to do is I'm going to glue those in, make sure they're nice and centered. We're going to route the wires up through the middle on each side, and then we'll figure out, we're going to get power off the receiver, so I'm going to measure the voltage on there, and we'll have to throw a resistor or two into the circuit. So that's the next step. Alright, I've got the two outer lights in and glued, so they're looking good. Alright, so we got all four headlights in, and they're all glued in place. I got a little battery pack here with a 1,000 ohm resistor in it, just to give us a baseline test here. I just want to make sure all four work before I button it up and move on to the back of the car. So this will be the negative terminal. Oops, this will be the positive. Alright, so that looks good. They are working. Alright, so it'll be a little brighter when I get the correct resistor in line there. But just for a test, that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and, let's see, try to snap one of these clear covers back on. Alright, nice and easy. Alright, good. I was worried about those. I didn't want them to snap. So they're back in place. Looking good. Alright, so now that we know everything works, what I want to do is I want to get these wires in a nice, comfortable position where they're not stressed. And then I'm going to stick just a drop of, not more than a drop of hot glue, just to keep them in place. I like this stuff. It's kind of easy to remove if you ever had to. It peels off, but it's also pretty strong. Pull this around here. Okay. I'll just hold that in place, let it, oops, sorry. I didn't realize it was off the camera there. So yeah, I got some glue on the corners there, and I threw some down into these headlight pockets here. It looks like a bit of a mess, but all these little strings you see, like the one that's stuck to my finger right now, they just peel off once it dries. Alright, so that's done. You can see this stuff here just peels right off. It's kind of like plastic spider web. So that's anchored down nice. I ran out of glue here, so that's how that's going to be. So that's all good. I think what I'm going to do also is I'm going to throw a red LED in this little post here, because there was one there from the factory, and it shined through this little hole in the car, and it told you the car was switched on. I think that, or it was charging, one or the other. So I'm gonna throw that on there, because you know, and if we don't want it, we can cut it out later. All right, so I got the little red LED in there. I'm just gonna test it out real quick again, make sure it works. So there we got negative and positive. Oops. That works. All right, so the next thing we have to do is determine what the battery eliminator voltage is on this speed controller. So what that is, the battery, the main battery in the car comes out of here and runs into the speed controller, and you can use anywhere from a 7.2 volt battery up to a 12.6 volt battery in this car. Whatever battery voltage is coming in on this wire is reduced down, or regulated down to 5 or 6 volts for this red circuit here. So the speed controller is going to put out that voltage on this wire and provide power to the receiver. And then that same power is spread across every other port on the receiver. So the voltage that this guy puts out is going to drive the servo, and it's also going to be used to run the lights. So what I've got here, I have a spare wire that I've cut. I stripped the positive and negative wires. The signal wire, which is the white wire, that tells, for example, the speed controller how fast to go, or the servo which way to turn and how much. We're not going to use that, so we're just going to hold that aside. But what I want to do is throw this into the receiver and find out exactly what voltage it is, 5 volts, 6 volts, what have you. Reason being, we need to know the exact voltage so we can calculate what resistor to use for the LEDs. Alright, so we're looking at 5 volts, 4.96, 4.9, so we're going to call that 5 volts. So we're going to plug that along with the current draw and voltage specifications for the LEDs into a calculator. I use just an Android calculator on my phone for LEDs, and that'll tell us which resistors to use. Alright, so for these 4 white ones in the front, the calculator said to use a 12 ohm resistor. I only had 10s and 20s, so you go with the next one up, not the next one down. I'm going to put some shrink, so I've got the 4 positive wires soldered together and then attached to a 20 ohm resistor. I'm going to cover that with a piece of shrink wrap, and I'm going to show you, for this one I'm going to have to use 2 pieces, because I'm going from such a small wire here into that group of 4 wires. So you put the first one on there. I don't know if you can see that, but there's still some exposed wires on this side here, because the smaller tube wouldn't fit over. So I'm going to take this larger one and I'll just slide it over here and hit it again, and that'll stay in place and keep us from shorting anything out. Alright, looks nice. Alright, so I'll do the same thing with the red one here. It's going to be a different value, and then I'm going to connect them all up. Alright, so I've got the front lights wired up to the receiver using the 20 ohm resistor. So these this will be a final test of the front end. This should be at their optimal brightness. When I tested them earlier just to make sure they worked with the 1000 ohm resistor, you know, that's just a really conservative resistor to use. It'll work for pretty much any LED you find, just as a quick test. But this here should be a bit brighter. Let's see what it looks like. Oops, sorry, just got the wires stuck together here. There we go. Yeah, so that's nice. That's really bright. I don't know if you can tell on the camera or not, but they look really good. I'll pull the brightness down there. You can see some detail. So that's going to look real nice driving around. All right. Let's get this little red guy wired up, and then we'll move on to the back of the car. All right, so let's take a look at the back of the car. We've got the two red lenses here, and we have a little hole on each side through the body shell where I guess the lens was mounted. Looks like they just melted it on, maybe used some adhesive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an LED in here, one on each side. I tried red LEDs back here, but it wasn't really that bright. So I went with white ones instead, and they'll shine through the red lens. And one other thing I did, when I held this LED here, just like this, a lot of light would shine through the body shell. So there'd be a lot of bleed through. It wasn't just the tail light that was lit up. So what I did is I put a piece of shrink tube over the LED itself, just left the end exposed, and that will let us just mount this guy right here. I'm going to glue it in position, and then all the light would go straight through the lens. There shouldn't be much bleed through. So let's see what that'll look like. All right, so let's take a look first at the unshielded LED. Cut the lights off a little bit here. So this guy's got no shrink wrap on it. So you see, if I put that up there, you can see where a lot of the body is lighting up. And it just looks unfinished. Looks like it's it wasn't designed to be there. All right, so here's the one I have shielded with some shrink wrap. So you can see it's still really bright when you look directly at it, but when I turn it, you can barely see it. So I'll put that up in there. You can see that's just going to light up the light, where the other one was kind of lighting all this up back here. So that's going to look pretty good. So let me get those glued in. All right, so I've got the tail lights glued in. So that's how they're going to look. As soon as the glue sets up, we'll go ahead and give them a test. Okay, so we've got the rear LEDs mounted up in there. I think I might take some black nail polish or paint and just paint over this here, so because we've got a little bit of light bleed coming out the bottom, so I'll just paint that over. But the back lights look great. There we go. Sorry. Let's see. So the back ones are looking good. Front lights look great. So I think we're going to call this done. I went ahead and in the other video I mentioned that some of these screws were stripped out. I tried to refill the holes a little bit with glue, but they still wouldn't grab. So I just went with a slightly larger screw back here and up front. And other than that, we're good to go. All right, so we're going to call this one done. The electronics are all installed, lights are installed. Took it for another quick test run in the house. It looks pretty neat driving around with the lights on. So that'll be about it for this one. Thanks for checking out the videos. If you have any questions, just leave a comment on the video or contact me through my website. And thanks again.